In order to decide what type of product organization you want to build, you have to decide what kind of company do you want to be. There are three kinds of software companies that you can be these days. One is investing in becoming agentic enterprise. Second would most likely be implementing what I now call a rule of 70. Really, really profitable because you're not growing, right? And the third kind of company is super simple. It's the one that seizes the right to exist. It's not just the products that you build, but also the kind of enterprise that you become internally as well, how you help your customers and what tools you implement in service, in HR, in customer success and sales.
Welcome back to the Meg and Amy Show. Thank you so much for the support for our show. Please do like and subscribe and add comments. We would love to hear from you and what you'd like to see more of on the show. Today we're joined by Maksim Ovsyannikov, Chief Product Officer at SugarCRM, where he's building what they call a precision selling platform, essentially reimagining how AI can transform revenue intelligence and the seller experience. But here's what makes Maksim's perspective unique. Over 25 years, he's been at the center of how enterprise software has evolved, from ADP to Salesforce, Zendesk to Gainsight, as EVP of Products and Design. He's built solutions that have fundamentally transformed how organizations approach sales, HR, marketing, service, and customer success, which means he's seen multiple waves of technology transformation. And today, we're digging into his vision for what's coming next. Because while most product leaders are busy optimizing for today's reality, Maksim has been thinking about what happens when that reality completely changes. Welcome to the show, Maksim.
So happy to be here, Amy.
Good to finally get to chat with you.
I think you're the first person that actually sent me an icebreaker question, like full on. So I'm super excited to ask it to you before we dive into the meaty stuff. So the question is, if you could swap jobs with anyone for a day, who would it be?
That's a good one for me. And the reason for that is a lot of people know this about me, that as an undergrad, I actually majored in econ.
Yay, econ major.
And my minor was human biology. You might not cheer that as much. And and the reason that I minored in human biology is because I really wanted to be a doctor. And I wanted to be a doctor so much that I didn't just major in it, but I took MCATs. I did really well, and I got into UCSF, and I didn't go. Because I met so many amazing entrepreneurs early on in Silicon Valley. They sort of changed my mind about the entire world that I wanted to be part of. And if you ask me now, who do I want to be for a day? I, to this day, for a day, want to be one of the general surgeons at UCSF, for sure.
What would be that one surgery that you're going to do that one day?
I would love to be a skilled person that removes a mass from a woman's breast.
Ooh, that seems very important. And you know, life is long. You could always go back and do the whole medical route someday. You never know.
I don't think so, because what they do, especially in this country, as you'll know, and as they should, is they require you to go through 4 years of medical school, 5 years of residency, and 2 years of fellowship. So I'll be retiring just when I'm done. I'll be sort of saying, okay, now I can't really do what I can do. I think I'm stuck with what I'm doing, ladies.
I guess we'll just have to make do.
It's a pretty good plan B.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to do something a little bit different today and delve into imagination to start with. So let me paint a picture. It's 2030, and the three of us are building a product organization from scratch. What does that look like? What do we need in terms of roles and people? What would the processes be? What's important from a tech perspective? What about go-to-market? What do customer relationships look like? We were thinking it would be really fun to pick your brain on this.
Yeah. I think there are two ways of answering this question, and I'll choose one path, and maybe we can chat about it as I go through it. The path that I will choose is, in order to decide what type of product organization you want to build and how does it look, you have to decide what kind of company do you want to be and what kind of company do you want to build as a result of that, right? So in my view right now, there are three kinds of companies that you can be. And let's just talk about a software company for a second, because that's what I'm really good at. I think you as well. There are three kinds of software companies that you can be these days. One is you can be investing in becoming agentic enterprise, and you can be really, really focused on that. Second is you would be, if you're not doing that, you would most likely be implementing what I now call a rule of 70, which used to be a rule of 40, right? So the new rule of 40 is really a rule of 70. And for those of us who are not familiar with that as much because we're not in finance, rule of 40 used to say that your margins plus your growth rate should equal to 40, meaning like you should be very profitable and you should be growing at some, rate. And rule of 70 says that you should be really, really, really profitable because you're not growing, right? So you're just, sort of letting people go and you're reducing costs every day, and that's what you're focusing on. So that's the second kind of company that you can be. And the third kind of company is super, super simple. It's the one that seizes the right to exist. If you're not converting yourself to become an agentic enterprise, if you're not fitting into rule of 70 the way that I just described, then you just don't exist anymore. You're done. You're just done.
Probably not a top choice.
Yeah. So, so we're not number three, and now we need to decide if we're one or two. And I think that for the purposes of this conversation, let's assume that we all want to become number one, right? So we want to become an agentic enterprise. And then the next sort of step in that thinking is, what does that mean? And for a lot of people, it means building products that incorporate AI, generative AI, and have a very different way of delivering value to customers. But I would also add that it's not just the products that you build, but also the kind of enterprise that you become internally as well, how you help your customers and what tools you implement in service, in HR, in customer support, in customer success, and sales. We would be building this very new company that delivers value in a very different way. And now we should have to outline what are some of the examples of different value that it would be delivering in its products, because we're talking about how we would build a product organization, right? First of all, I think we would be very interested in outcomes that our solution provides versus the user experience, or UI UX as we used to say, that it offers. And if you want any more examples of this, then look at ChatGPT, right? Look at the most powerful tool that exists on the planet right now. It's a simple chat that has no user experience other than totally borrowed interface from any SMS that we have ever sent, right? Where you have a prompt and then someone responds to you. In this case, it's not someone, it's OpenAI, right? So we would be looking for product managers who are really interested in discovering ways to deliver outcomes. Not via, and your number one value proposition as a result of that would not be that you have this incredible user experience, but your number one value proposition is that you have very little user experience to start with. So that's one on the product side. And then on the design side, right now we need to ask ourselves, what does it mean for our product design organizations? If design is dead, then what is product design? Well, product design is not dead. It just has a very different way of executing itself. It's more conversational. It's more human. It's even more intuitive as a result, I would say. And one example I will give there is, let's assume, and we know this across all enterprise companies, if we went to our customers right now and asked you, what are your top 5 pain points? One of the pain points out there would be, I'm really having a hard time with your analytics, right? They would certainly say that. Certainly they would say that. And in this new age, right, we would say that we don't need a designer to help us build a super powerful way to build a report or a dashboard that's easy. We need a designer to design a conversational method of how we can ask AI some of our inquiries, and so that we can receive them in a form of reports or dashboards that we can then just use, basically.
I have a question about that. I have lots of questions, and I know Meg does too, but I'm going to interrupt you right now.
Aren't you proud of me for letting you go first, Amy?
Yeah, I am. So you wrote fairly recently that dashboards are old school, but at the same time, the need to provide proactive intelligence is really important, right? Most people aren't particularly good at knowing what questions to ask to really get a sense of what's happening in the business and where to take the business. I think people are getting better, but it's still not great. So what is the new paradigm for proactive intelligence if it's not a dashboard?
Yeah. So what is a dashboard? A dashboard is one of two things. A dashboard is something that was built for you by your admin a year ago, and you're just consuming it. Or a dashboard is something, if you're good at it, is built by you for you a few months ago. A dashboard is really never something that's built by you for you right now in the morning, right? Every day. Mm-hmm. So then the question becomes like, let's say we have the following questions. As a seller, I want to know what are my risks and opportunities. That's a very simple human question that I have as a seller, right? I want to know that every day so that I can address them, so that I can, really win with the opportunities that I have. If someone defines the definition of risks for me a year ago, and then puts that definition in a portlet on a dashboard or whatever is the right term for it these days, right? And then I execute on it when I wake up in the morning and I look at that dashboard, then I'm not seeing the right definition of risks, because definition of risk changes on a weekly basis in a normal business, whatever you are, a new company, old company, doesn't matter, right? So then the right way to be good with analytics is not to use predefined dashboards that have rules that are built into them so that the data shows up a certain way, but ask business outcome questions, right? In this case, a business outcome question is, what is my risk in my book of business? And then have AI in this case with a lot of context, not just an LLM, but with a lot of context about your specific book of business, answer this question for you.
So this gets to one of my more recent sort of niggling things. So I actually kind of go in two directions with your perspective here, which I love. The first, let's go with the shift from user experience and pre-done UI UX to more sort of outcome focused things. One of the things that I've been pondering, and I actually really loved it. CJ and Kyle on the Mostly Growth podcast had a great conversation about how all of the new applications all look the same, and they all have the ChatGPT text box to ask a question, and then maybe one or two kind of suggestions or ideas underneath it. And on the one hand, we've all grown to love that from the Google paradigm and the simplicity of it. On the other hand, it definitely struggles a little bit from the IKEA problem, which is it assumes a very large burden on the user of understanding and clarity of question, right? And so I'm just curious, in this world where the value for the customer is very much driven with bringing in real-time information to a series of business problems, the assumption is that the customer is truly connected with what their business outcomes are and what sort of questions they would need to ask underneath that. I wonder if this isn't a space, and as we're talking about organizations, if this really isn't a space that has the glue under that, that's something that looks more like a forward deploy story, where there's somebody, some level of support provided for the individual, whether that's virtual support or human support, to build the expertise and the muscle to understand how to best get value out of these agentic systems. Because I worry without that, we're going to end up with what we used to feel in the HR world, which is, oh, let's predict risk of attrition. And you can get a lot of people's ire up by just stating that statement, because most of us understand that that's much more complicated than the people who love that question really appreciate. So I just like, have you thought about like, where is that middle space between, yes, it's a conversational, and yes, it's a bespoke, made for you in the moment with real information with a lot of context, but what if the user doesn't know what context matters for them and what their business problem really is? How are we thinking about like filling that gap, because that's an important gap to value creation?
Yeah, we should definitely assume that, Meg. I love that, because that's what the best products are. We have to assume that the user doesn't know what to do, and then we build a better product as a result of making that assumption, right? So I'll challenge this a little bit in this specific case, because I think 2 or 3 years ago, we were very worried that user wouldn't know what to ask or how to ask. And I think we have overwhelming evidence right now that you can ask in so many ways that the LLM understands that that's really not the number one thing to solve for. And I'll give you one example, and I want to hear if it resonates with you. So the example that I will give is, let's assume that you're again a seller and you don't know the outcomes, right? So you don't know to ask a question, what are my risks? You don't know that word risk. I mean, we should probably not hire sellers that don't know that word, but that's a separate thing, right? Let's assume they don't know. So then you can ask, what should I do today? That's a question that you can now ask LLMs that have the right context, right? And then they understand, they will probably ask you, who are you? And you're going to say, I'm a seller, and they should already know that in the proper enterprise implementation of AI, right? And then LLM will say, as a seller, you should worry about your risks and opportunities, and here they are. Right. So I the reason that I challenge that a little bit is that we have overwhelming amount of data that you can ask this in all kinds of human ways without having a lot of business context.
So my next question was really around this idea of context, because context does shift over time, and the definition of what matters is rapidly evolving. And I tend to think about this multidimensionally, right? Like, most organizations are trying to transform and to figure out how they're shifting to take advantage of the world today. And then most individuals are trying to keep up with what the business is doing. Are we laying off people? Are we expanding people? Are we going into this market? Are we not going into this market? Do we sell soybeans to China or not? I mean, these are things that change by the minute.
Political comments here. Political comments.
Well, I don't mean it politically. I mean it from a, what does it mean to run a business in a world that there are forces and things that change in your market that come on very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And that creates a space for understanding context that is dynamic. And again, I think this is a place where an agentic enterprise can really, really help. So I'm curious, how do you see the mechanics of that working in a bit more of a proactive way to help people get more clarity of what is changing in their context, what matters for their success? So back to your question of, what should I do today? Who am I? And why does it matter? I'm curious about both the personalization opportunity of bringing that context forward, but also the repetition of it and the timeliness of it, because these are things that really get in the way of organizations being able to execute against their business plans, because they struggle to get everybody clear on what matters today.
By the time everybody's on the same page, the page is turned to a different page.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That really, really super resonates with me. So in order to answer this question, we need to dissect it a little bit and understand, where is the true value proposition or differentiation that you can build, for example, as an enterprise software vendor with generative AI. And it is not in licensing an OpenAI LLM, right? It's not in putting ChatGPT enterprise license without any other context in front of your users. That's really not the value proposition. That's not the differentiation anymore, right? And no wonder if we look at the MIT report from a month or two ago, it says that 95% of these deployments fail. Well, the reason they fail is because they've done nothing but put enterprise license of ChatGPT in front of a user, and that is just almost the same as doing a web search, right, on something that you are interested in. So it's not really, it doesn't have any context about your customers. It doesn't really know what are your HR issues, or it doesn't know what works and what doesn't work, right? So the value proposition or the differentiation becomes in giving this LLM a lot of context. And you really, really have to own it. Like, this is back to what should the product manager be working on, is this, right? Really understanding how do I build a method and a system by which various relevant context gets ingested. Let's go back to the seller experience, day in a life, and let's consider this a seller, and let's wonder what context would LLM benefit from in order to give her a very good advice, right? For example, should we build an ingestion channel of all customer conversations, especially prospect conversations? And should we align them with an outcome of that conversation and see whether the deal closed after it, so that LLM, now with that context, can give my seller a really good advice on what she should do 1 hour before she engages with one of her prospects, right? So that becomes the skill, like thinking this way and dividing AI into areas of what is the differentiation and what is not the differentiation, I think matters.
So actually in the last couple of episodes that we've done, we had Dr. Kristen Ferguson talk about the need for seekers as leaders in the future. And then we had Yamini Rangan, CEO of HubSpot, talk about how people needed to become explorers rather than map readers. So I think when you say PMs of the future need to focus on discovering outcomes, it's right in line with both of those experts as well. So what does that look like in terms of, hiring? Like, how do you detect that? And then also, how do people kind of prepare themselves for that sort of mindset to move into that space, whether they're looking for a job or they're in kind of a legacy situation and they need to break out of it and, become this new paradigm?
I think I have good news for both the hiring managers here and the people that are looking for these jobs. And for hiring managers, Amy, you and I have always looked for a product manager who was walking into a discovery session with a customer and not asking, what feature do you want me to build for you, but was instead asking, what do you want to achieve? Right? That's outcomes. So we were always looking for that type of product manager. And for a good product manager, you were always this kind of product manager, right? You weren't walking in and asking, how does the button look like for you? Should it be on the left side or on the right side? And, what size should it be so that you notice it? Because that's what I want to build for you, right? You were always asking, how can I make you more productive in a certain way that helps your business or your role? So I think we just need to double click and amplify everything that we've been looking for.
It's funny because like you say that, and like every time it comes back to like, it's always been true, but it's even more crucial now,
It's
right?
more crucial now.
And I think the one thing that I would add to that is, yes, product managers need to focus on, when they're talking to customers, what do you want to achieve, and to look at outcomes and that sort of thing, and get away from the features. However, the world of possibility is changing so fast and is so expansive, right? That there needs to be like an extra level of curiosity and exploration than even before. Because let's say before, when you would have this customer interview, you'd have kind of like your tool bag. So you'd be asking the questions and you'd be interviewing them, and you'd be able to like have your brain synthesize, you know, what the customer's saying and what the tools offer. And now the tools have just exploded, right? And so you're asking these questions and like having to synthesize with all those tools that are available today is kind of like mind-boggling. And
Yeah.
that's what's different, I would say.
100%. And I would also add that the framework of generative AI is helping product managers to think this way. Because again, what we have to deal with is a chatbot. So as a product manager, you have less creative freedom to start thinking where you would place a button on the page, right? Because you're sort of guarded by tunneling your thoughts in a very specific outcome-driven way. So if you just follow that guidance, I think that's where you will land as a good product manager.
Yeah. No, that's such a good point, that you can leverage the tools themselves to help you manage the tools.
I think the other part that is shifting, and I would like to see us think about, is also how we define the persona of customer that we talk to and what their role is going to be. Because I think we're already seeing a large set of indicators that roles are collapsing, and that there's a little bit of an expectation for more sort of hybrid functions. And I'm not just talking in the software development lifecycle, I'm talking about in the market writ large. There's a lot of energy that's starting to emerge around, if individuals have better tools, can they cover more ground in the role that they play or in the definition of what they do for their job. And so I think as product managers, when you talk to customers, you have to also have the sort of intellectual mental model clarity that the customers you're talking to today are doing jobs that may not be there tomorrow. And so understanding what they do and how they do it and what they need is important, but also getting more signal to the context of the business, I think, is going to be important, because otherwise we'll end up delivering a lot of value for a business model that doesn't really exist within the customers.
Yeah. And the value you're ultimately delivering to a customer here, if you're talking about these jobs that we think will not exist, is the following. If you are level 1 anything, let's say you're level 1 support analyst, and your job is to receive calls or emails and respond to them, right? We think that those kind of jobs will exist less and less because of generative AI. And if you look everywhere across what you would then define as level 1, that's the immediate kind of value that generative AI would offer to replace or substitute. And that's a fact. So then when you have a conversation with your customer, and, you know, if you are afraid to say this to them, then you almost have to have a suggestion of what they would become if they're level 1 now and their job would, you know, sort of go away. And you just need to tell them that you will become level 2.
That's right.
And that's what enterprise software, that's what we always thought we were building with enterprise software. We wanted level 1 to become level 2 and level 2 to become level 3. And we never delivered on it in most cases, right? The original foundation of CRM, I'm a CRM guy now. The original foundation of CRM was to help the seller sell. Yes, well, if you went to Salesforce's conference 2 weeks ago, they will show you a demo of a developer studio and all that kind of stuff. So they're really, really broadening their use case. But the original foundation was to help the seller sell. And so if we give the seller these generative AI tools that really help them sell in a much better way, then their job doesn't go away. They just become a better seller, right? They go from level 1 to level 2 faster than they would otherwise.
I completely agree. And I think it is on all of us as innovators to take that responsibility seriously, right? To put ourselves in a position to help make that true. Because if we don't, then we are not actually building a sustainable model for value creation.
Yep.
Right? We're building a temporary bridge to nowhere, maybe, to your third possibility of irrelevance.
The road to nowhere.
Yes. Yes.
All right. What else in terms of this product organization of the future? What have we not talked about yet? What do you think is important, Maxime?
I also think that the future that we're talking about here is not that far into the future. So don't feel like you have to change yourself so much and be so futuristic, because we're almost in 2026 and we're talking about 2030, right? So just keep thinking of outcomes, keep guarding yourself with how AI interacts with you, because that's how your solution needs to interact with your customers. And maybe also remind yourself that it doesn't all go away, right? That you're building this on top of the product that already exists. You're not ripping out and replacing everything that your customers are used to, especially if you're a company with decades of experience and hundreds and thousands of customers and millions or billions in revenue.
Now, that said, you have written recently that really, in terms of looking at the future enterprise, you need to be thinking about AI first and features second, right? So like how does that work? Like what does that look like? And how do, these legacy companies move to that? How does that work?
It's almost the same as me saying just a few minutes ago that instead of building a user experience, think about how you can offer certain outcomes, right? So it's kind of like the same guidance that I would broadly apply. Now let's answer the second part of your question. And I think what you're asking is if you are a legacy co, and if you have decades of experience with your customers, and if you've taken your customers on a semi-complicated journey over these decades, how do you all of a sudden become an agentic enterprise, and how do you offer this to them, right? And I think that the right way to do that is not instead of what existed in your app, but in addition and on top. So if you're adding a chat experience, don't replace the homepage that a user used to land on entirely with that experience. Build it into a part of your page and allow someone to engage with it. And if you want to improve engagement, which we all do as product managers, then build some of those pre-built prompts on top that give them some guidance about how to engage with AI, or even give them some of the questions that they should be asking AI on a daily basis. But remember that you will really have a hard time with your customer success team if all of a sudden what you do is rip out and replace everything in your app. Think of agentic AI, think of AI, think of generative AI in a very additive way.
And I would think the other piece that would really matter is also leverage what you have access to today that used to be very hard, which is better clarity of what your customers are doing and how they're using these solutions. Because you have the opportunity to do better forensics on what are the themes that people are struggling with, what are the themes that people are enthusiastic about, what do they keep coming back for more, and why. And I think building that curiosity against a corpus of AI agents is actually a really fruitful ground for noticing patterns and thinking about how you can deliver value, and that can evolve with the real ability to use it within those customer base.
Yes. And don't hire a consultant to help you along that path. Figure this out yourself. It's amazing how all of a sudden, there's so many consultants that call themselves AI consultants, and all of a sudden they know AI and they can give you all of this advice about AI. You really, really, really have to figure this out yourself.
So tell me more about how you would recommend people do that. If they agree with you that they want to figure it out themselves, but they're a little bit confused as to what they would do, maybe walk through the way you would look at that problem.
Again, I would say it's no different than 15 years ago, right? When we were building an HRIS, we had to have people that understood what is an HRIS. And if we only hired people that had no idea what it was and had no curiosity in discovering what it was, then we would have never built an HRIS, right? Workday would not have gone public with 100 customers and $100 million in revenue, okay? If they didn't know what an HRIS is. a fascinating example of a company going public with only 100 customers, and that's just, really amazing, right? A lot of value, a lot of understanding in what is HRIS, right? Really, really awesome example of that. Same here. If you have a CTO that has never done this, I don't know how to help you. If you have a CPO that has never done this, I don't know how to help. Like, you really need to look at your talent. And, in the model of talent, I'm not saying replace everyone. I'm saying actually hire some individuals that have experience and then layer them with people that have curiosity and can learn from them, right? That's how we've done it all the time, basically, right? So nothing changes here. But if you have an engineering team and a product team that was hired 15 years ago, and if they have not advanced in their understanding of what the field is or what the field does, it's really no different as if you were a doctor, or if I was a doctor, and if I was stuck in the 15 years ago, thinking about how to do certain operations or how to, advance some of the best therapies for my patients, right? You have to be up to date. So please be up to date. And if you don't feel like you're up to date, bring in people that are up to date that can help you become more up to date, who are not consultants.
And the reason you don't want them to be consultants is because you want them to stay on your mission?
Yeah, it's your core, like you as this company, as this first kind of company that we described that's becoming a agentic enterprise, right? It's your core competency. It's your real core competency. And that sort of goes a little bit further, right? So this experience, this conversational chat experience, should we OEM it or should we build it, right? That's also a very good question. And then Meg, as you said earlier, like context is really important. So we need a system that understands our context that we can give. So then make sure that you understand that you're building this for the long term. Now, what I'm not saying is that you don't need product strategy help and those kind of consultants, right? You should definitely have outside in perspective that you constantly bring into your business from reputable sources, right? But if something is your core competency, use that perspective and own it and build with it and build on top of it.
Yeah, I do love that. I have in the past been known to call that having a product soul. That I believe that to be a real serious product organization that delivers for customers for the long term, you absolutely have to have a soul. And that soul has to be built on the conviction of your market, your customer, and what you want to bring to the world as part of that. And so I also agree with you and have a ton of belief that if you outsource your soul, you're not going to have the long-term value. And I don't think that where we are today in this agentic enterprise, I don't think it's mature enough that you can do that.
Well, and hopefully it never will be, because that's really dangerous. Right?
Yeah, but I think when you have very mature markets, you could potentially kind of go on in your rule of 70 and like be incremental in stuff you already know, doing things the way you've always done it. But if you're going after something that's new and something that has a high degree of change, you have to deeply empathize and understand with what does the market need, what does the customer need, and how does the product meet that need in that moment.
Exactly. And on top of this, I would add that another sort of layer of urgency and anxiety that you should have is that we already outsourced a big part of our soul. And we don't own an LLM, we license it, right? And that's like a big part that we used to build this with. So what would happen if in 6 months, OpenAI doubled their licensing fees and reduced the number of tokens that you can use or charged you more excess fees? And that's a huge risk that we're taking.
It's getting more expensive, not less expensive, right? So yeah.
Not only that, but they're sort of, as we hear on the news every day, running out of resources. And when I say resources, I mean real resources. These are not human resources. We're talking about energy and infrastructure resources, right?
Right. So they're gonna have to prioritize. Yeah.
Just imagine that is already a risk that you built into your everyday life of wanting to become an agentic, and that's a given. That's a dial tone risk, and that's huge. We have never built enterprise software companies with that kind of dial tone risk. The most that we've done is we have outsourced our infra to folks like GCP, AWS, etc., and that was pretty big. But now we're doing that and a significant layer of our platform in addition to it. That's huge.
I've been thinking a lot about the software development lifecycle and how that is changing or will change, in terms of like the fact that you've got, you've removed certain constraints and maybe you've added new ones. There's humans and AI in the mix potentially, and interacting and that sort of thing. So since you're in the throes of it right now, Maksim, maybe you can talk a little bit about how you're seeing the software development lifecycle change and where you hope to see it be in a few years.
One specific thing I want to zoom in on is QA and the importance of QA in the agentic enterprise. Let's take my example for a moment. Let's say that I'm building a precision selling platform at SugarCRM, right?
For a random example, yes.
Which helps sellers get good leads and helps them win. Those two very important things, right? With laser focus on that. Well, guess what, ladies? I better make sure that my precision selling platform has precision, right? And how do I make sure that? The only way that I can make sure that is not just by developing it, by engineering it, but also by testing, in big part by testing that it has precision. So QA in this era of agentic enterprise has huge importance, even greater importance than it had in the other phases of enterprise software growth. And just kind of think about it, what that means. Writing test cases looks very, very different. Executing them looks very, very different. You will find more issues and more bugs that will take longer to fix because you will need to give your LLM an entirely new context in order to give you a better, more precise answer, right? Your beta programs need to become longer as an enterprise software vendor, right? Because you want to put this in the hands of the customer and get ample validation that you're giving them precision selling platform and not just a CRM, right? So that's just one example, and I think is the most fundamental one. When we look at the software development lifecycle, QA just receives enormous importance, has a very different angle, and is very, very center of the development lifecycle. We used to think of like engineering as a center of development lifecycle, and I think QA is more technical these days than it used to be, right, as a result of that. And I think that it's a very important phase of your software development that you need to specifically put more effort in.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I hadn't thought of that, but in the past, the failures would be like a mechanical failure, right? And you had like, there were certain things that could cause it, and so it was a pretty narrow field of possible errors. And now with hallucinations and all that, there's just so many ways that the LLM can steer you wrong.
Yeah.
And when it's crucial that it gets it precisely right, then you have to put a lot of guardrails around it.
Yeah, just imagine again, my example as a seller, I go and I ask, what are my risks and opportunities? I'm an educated seller. And it says, oh, if you're looking for peaches, you can buy them across the street. Like that is not, like, we need to test for that.
It's an opportunity.
Yeah.
Come on, Maxime, it's an opportunity.
But can you imagine, Amy? We need to test for that.
Right. Right.
We now need to test for that.
Yeah. Right. And also,
don't talk about peaches.
Right.
Don't talk about peaches.
No?
But also, I think not only do we need to test for that, but we also need to have slightly different playbooks for the reality of a probabilistic solution as well. So helping, because the remediations are going to be different to your other point,
Yeah.
right? Where you run into a problem, it's going to show up in a different way, and the way that you're going to remediate it, it's not just a technical remediation, but you also need to think about the human guardrails and the customer communication and relationship guardrails, so that it becomes that the trust is improved while simultaneously the recognition that you're never going to see every possible scenario in that workflow in the way that you used to be able to when you had a deterministic system. So I think there's a multi-layered education opportunity there, to your point. And no matter how you look at that, the function and the role of a QA team really becomes critical to making that happen. Do you see any other kind of structural roles that are either collapsing or expanding in the world of software, not just even within the software development part of the life cycle, but the entire solutioning of being a software company?
One role on my team that I see expanding in the agentic enterprise vision and on its roadmap is a role of product operations. And the reason for that is, again, based on everything that I'm saying, we're going to look at our beta programs very differently. We're going to interact with our customers very differently before we GA the solution, because we really need to make sure of certain things. And I think this discipline of product team interacting with your customers and with the market and with sources of validation that you can get, all possible sources of validation that you can get before you GA the product, is something that product operations function can elevate itself to. And I think we're seeing some of the most strategic product operations folks do that. And I'm seeing that on my team at SugarCRM, that product operations becomes very important in this motion of handing the solution over from development to internal testing to beta testing to general availability.
Maxime, anything else you want to share? Maybe something that product leaders are maybe missing today and they should be thinking about preparing for?
I don't want to share anything else other than say that I love seeing both of you.
I love seeing you.
And this is so fun.
I have to say, doing a podcast, you start off and you have one idea and you start doing it and that idea evolves, and it has become much more fun than I had expected. I just adore having opportunity to talk with people I find interesting and learning together and testing out theories. It's been just delightful. So thank you for saying that, because it means a lot to us.
What are your networking tips to fantastic leaders who happen to be introverts? These leaders are excellent and don't have any problems evangelizing their product, rallying their teams, or doing anything related to their teams or product. But they need help when it comes to casual networking or resurrecting relationships with past colleagues. What's your advice?
So I have a few things, because you pretty much described 2009 Meg, and it's interesting. I went back to look at some blogs that I had written in that time frame, because that was exactly what I was working on in that moment. The recognition that I enjoyed and loved having conversations all day long with people that wanted to ask me things about the product, about the market, about all of those things. That has been true probably since birth. But I really, really did not love the creating new relationships or small talk or any of the other pieces that are traditionally thought of as networking. And I kind of walked an entire arc of putting a lot of pressure on myself and giving myself a whole lot of strong expectations in this. And now, with the benefit of a few years between when that happened and where I am today, I have a few points of view that I kind of keep going back to, because as I have matured, I still struggle with this in a very big way, but I've kind of learned to lean on some tools. So I will try to share with you some of my tactics. If I'm going to a networking event, an event where you're completely set up that that's the entire purpose of you being there, the beginning of a conference or something where you're supposed to do networking, I deploy a few tactics to help handicap myself on this. Number one, the best one, bring an extrovert with you. The person that loves to go up and say hey to everybody and start the conversation. That is a fantastic weapon if you can get it. Number two, I set my bar very, very low, actually. So I give myself someone or two that I want to meet in an event. And I tell myself if I met one person and had an interesting interaction with them, that was a success. Usually if I set that bar, I not only achieve that, but I usually exceed it. And then I start to feel better about the story I tell myself about how I am as a networker. And then lastly, I try to remind myself that I am my best self when I care about others and I enjoy helping others. And so instead of getting into my own head thinking I have to talk about myself, I let myself be who I am, which is interested and nerdy and eager to have really deep conversations. And I let myself try to find people that are willing to engage at that. And I try to make it about them and not about me.
Yeah, my friends call me the interrogator because I ask so many questions, which can cause people a little pain sometimes, but it weeds them out. And yeah, I think that goes to your point.
Tactical advice that I will give to introverts is when you register for an event, reach out to an organizer, introduce yourself as an introvert, and ask them whether or not they would be able to connect you with some people maybe ahead of the event or in the beginning of the event as an organizer, because there's always more chances that that person has more of the relationships with the attendees. What do event organizers want? They want you to come to the event. So how do they bring people to the event? They should have all kinds of strategies for introverts, for extroverts, right? As a good event organizer, you should be asking this question proactively. You should be saying, like, if you don't know anyone who's attending this event, here's a community that you can join online a month before the event where you can start the conversation, right? So that is what you should be doing. Now, strategically, I think that an introvert should read Mel Robbins' wonderful book that is called The Let Them Theory. And the reason that I say that is because a lot of introverts are really shy about being introverts. And the reason that they're shy about this is because it really, really bothers them to be recognized as introverts and then potentially judged as introverts, or maybe interpreted, in a different way, or not interpreted at all. And I think you need to walk in the room with more tools and more power. And the way that you walk in that kind of room with more tools and more power is you let them think what they will think, and you let me, which is you, decide why you are there, and that you sort of recognize the fact that there will always be some people that will look at you and say, well, he's weird. They look at me and say that every day. Right? In all kinds of rooms. And that's okay. And that will happen everywhere you go, with your friends, with your family, in all kinds of environments, right? You just have to be okay with it. And I think that reading that specific book is one strategic step that you can take as an introvert.
The one very practical thing that I did, especially early in my career, was that I made sure to have to set aside lunch every day and to have lunch with somebody every single day. And this was really key for me, I think, in terms of building up that kind of deeper social network. And of course, at the time it was within a company, mostly PeopleSoft, because that was my early career. So I was at PeopleSoft and I'd have lunch every day. not always with a different person, but a lot of the time with a different person. And what I saw, like I saw the effects of that, which were people that, offered me jobs later or connected me to jobs later, people that went to other companies and then connected, you know what I mean? Like, so it was, keeping it kind of close and somewhat easy and enjoyable. That was really fun. Now, it's maybe a little harder now because maybe we're remote or we're not in the office every day, or we're like insanely busy. So maybe you have to pare it down a little bit, and you like plan to have lunch with somebody once a week, and make that time and believe that is just as important as any other project that you're doing that you feel like you have to rush back to your laptop for.
In fact, Amy made me love her because we used to do lunch every week.
There you go.
That's right.
Oh yeah, is that how we became like
Besties, pretty much.
Cordial to one another?
I think it might have been.
I'm going to take Amy's advice and invite both of you to lunch.
Yay! Definitely.
Lunch. We live near each other. It's definitely doable.
And we already noticed you're right in between us, so we will have to come to you. So that'd be perfect.
Thank you both.
Wasn't that fun? I knew it was going to be fun, but yeah, what a nice thing to be talking about things near and dear to our heart.
What did we learn, Meg?
I really like the aha moment that seems obvious but is so important, which is all of the skills that have mattered up until now, they still matter. They just matter in a more dramatic way. And I also love the idea that the roles of product and engineering, the function of building high quality solutions for customers, the needs are even bigger ahead of us than behind us. And so while we spend a lot of time going, oh my goodness, the sky is falling and things are hard and interest rates are high and people are struggling and layoffs are happening, I think it's nice to take a moment and really ground on the big picture. The jobs are changing, but they're getting more interesting, not less. The needs are changing, but they're getting more multidimensional, not less. And I think that there is a real optimism in what we can together imagine for the future. And that I like that. So it was a good conversation for me. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think there's enough of that happening yet. And so we're in kind of this messy middle right now where there's a lot of reduction in force because of AI without there really being good AI applied. And the future is that there's going to be a lot more opportunities, a lot of big changes and wonderfulness, right? And so those are the two extremes. And the messy middle is right now where there aren't jobs and there aren't great outcomes and there aren't great processes, right.
Right.
But hopefully we can shrink that messy middle to a really just a little blip in our, it doesn't feel like a blip now, but maybe in a few years it'll seem like a blip.
And I hope we use this time, this messy middle time, to prepare ourselves for a rate of change and a renewed interest in context in a way that better equips us to build more interesting solutions.
Yeah.
So I think this is important time to be even more in the game as opposed to stepping back and focusing on the negativity. So I guess with that, I say, let's invent the future together, everyone. I believe in us.
Good plan. Let's make every day count.